Hello, and welcome to the three-part workshop, the online slow stitching workshop for an apple slice snippet roll. Each part of the workshop is broken down into easy and manageable steps. In today's video, we'll go over looking for our materials and creating our apple slices, both the half apple as well as the slice. I'll link to my previous video where I show how to make that half apple so it's all ready to go. And then I show you some design tricks in the next video where we'll place our apples as well as creating the background pieces and start to add stitches. In the final video though, that's where we bring everything to life. We'll add additional stitches. I'll give you lots of variations and different methods that you can use. We'll add some buttons and some different shapes to our final piece. Snippet rolls are very fun to design, but they're time consuming. And if you're prepared, we'll have a great time. So let's get started. So here's an example of the snippet roll that we're going to make today. It's going to be a three-part workshop, and I break each part into manageable parts. Now the beauty of this snippet roll, and really any snippet roll, is there's so much discretion for the artist, so you can really play around. I'll just show you the techniques that I use, and you can pick and choose the ones you want or vary them accordingly. Now I'll link the video below to show you how I made the half apples here, the cross section. Today I'm going to show you how I make the slices, give you your little homework to do for the next video. We'll just break it down into reasonable steps. So this is just beautiful. It has all these different textures, this really dimension. Even though it's a flat piece, it just has so much dimension with the stitches and the different layers of fabric. It's got a cute little button here, some lace, all these things that we're going to use. Now I encourage you to use whatever items you have on hand for the fabric. This is an abstract apple, so the colors don't have to be realistic. They just have to hint at realism. And we kind of do that with the shapes and the layers and the various components of the apples, the seeds and the core and the leaves and the stems. So it's very forgiving that way. And then you just add some stitches additionally to pull it all together to make it really a cute snippet roll. This is a great thing to wrap around a jar if you have like a bean pot or something on your dresser. Or you can use it as a little table runner. There's just so many options to do with this. If you make them long enough, which does require a lot of patience, they're beautiful garlands for trees or doorways. So this is the cute little apple half. And we'll get started right away. I'm going to show you the basics for creating the structure of the snippet roll, and then we'll do the apple slices. So to begin creating the snippet roll, you'll want to have either a piece of quilted fabric, or some fabric with a lot of structure. This is muslin. It doesn't have what I consider structure. It's beautiful, and I love working with muslin, but it's so gentle and delicate. So I like to back it with just some batting. You can use an additional piece of fabric if you don't have batting. You can use just a quilted piece of fabric. And this is going to be the basis of our snippet roll. Now you can make them in any size, any height. This is roughly 3 inches or about 8.5 centimeters tall. And my piece of muslin here is about 40 centimeters long, maybe 16 inches long. Again, use whatever materials you have, and if you know you want to make a large one or a really narrow one, you can do this. You'll just change your apples that you make out of fabric accordingly to fit your piece. So this is the basics of the snippet roll. I have the roll, the batting for it, a lot shorter, maybe just a couple of inches shorter overall, and a little bit shorter in height as well, just because I don't want the batting to show through. But use your judgment. If you like the look of the batting showing through, or you want that batting to come right up to the end, go right ahead and do that accordingly. Let me show you the materials we're going to use to finish off the snippet roll, as well as to make our apples. So I have my pin cushion with embroidery floss, and those are just colors that roughly match the colors I'm going to use. The first thing I wanted to do is find some this is heavyweight muslin, but I just wanted a neutral color. And this is for the inside of the apple, both the slice or the core. You can use pattern fabric as well. It's just gorgeous. I just prefer a neutral. You can use white or any colors that you choose. Then I needed colors of the apples. I wanted to have green leaves, so I have 4 fabrics here to choose from. Some are patterns, some are solid colors, some are larger patterns. They're all just very beautiful greens. And I'll use some of these, or maybe all of them. We'll see as this workshop progresses. I also chose a lighter green, and this is the one I want to use to make the apples themselves. I wanted to have some green apples. Could use any of these colors. I just liked the idea of this lighter green. I have some beautiful orangey pink colors. I'm going to make that for my apple. And then I have this fabric that I've always really loved, and I'm going to cut out some of the yellow parts to make the apples and the apple slices. So if you have pattern fabric, that's just an all-over pattern, you can get one effect. If you have a solid color, you get a different effect. And if you had a graduated color, you can get lots of variations. This reminds me more of an apple itself than these, but this is an abstract piece. My last fabric that I have is just some autumn fabric that I love. It talks about autumn harvests and acorns and corn, and I even found on this particular fabric there's something with apple cider. So I'm going to use this not as my apples, but to really decorate my snippet roll. So I'll set that aside. I have some lace because I like to add that to my snippet roll, and I like to use 2 widths of lace. You don't have to do that. You can use as many or as few, or you can leave it out altogether. These are just slightly off-white. If I used white, I thought it would be a little too harsh against the colors that I'm using here. So that's why I chose that. I have a Frixian pen here that will erase with heat, and then I have some buttons that I might use. I also have some pearl thread, which matches the muslin quite well, and I'll use this quite a bit in my work to stitch my apples together, to use embellished stitching right around the core, and to hold the apples down in place. So let's get started creating the apple slices. So for this snippet roll, I like to have an abundance of apple pieces, not the apple on the backing, but just the piece itself, and I'll show you how I do that. And I also like to have the slices. I think it just adds a little variation to the piece. Now you can add as many or as few apples as you want. I like to make them in different sizes, so I vary that quite a bit. To make my apple slice, or my apple in this case, I want to make sure that the apple is not bigger than the snippet roll. So I'll just pay attention to that. To make my slice, I take some fabric for the color of the apple skin that I want to show, and then I have my heavyweight muslin. It's the same procedure as making the apple, it's just a different shape and a different format. So here, I'll kind of create the slice shape, which is really just a half circle, and I round it out. So I'll cut this right out of the fabric, and I would do this with all my fabrics that I want to make for the different color apples. So I'm going to use 3 colors, the green, this yellow, and that coral color. But I'm just going to show you how I make one. So basically it looks like a half circle or even like a little lemon wedge. From there I take my heavyweight muslin and I'll just press that apple right up to the top of it. And now I'm just going to trace the outline. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get the shape of this particular apple slice that I'm using. I'm just going to cut it out smaller, about 1/8 of an inch smaller than the line that's already there. The line that I traced. And now I can just hold it up against the apple, the color, and see. Now, apples don't have very thick skins. It's not like a citrus fruit. So that's kind of more accurate than if I was to cut it shorter. I like the idea of seeing a little more of that fabric. This is a textile art and I just happen to like that fabric. I realize it isn't as accurate. So that's okay with me. I'm willing to make that sacrifice as long as I have that beautiful fabric showing. To me, that's worth it. If you're into realism far more than that, then go ahead and make your apple slices however you'd like, showing just a thin layer of fabric. So now that I have that, because I'm preparing it for the snippet roll, I'm not going to attach it to a piece. I could pin it in place, but I'm just going to hold it down in place with in between my thumb and forefinger. And now I have some brown embroidery floss. It's just dark brown, and I'm going to stitch the seeds on. Now, stitching the seeds on is a really great addition to the apple slice, but it also really anchors the two fabrics together. To make this easier, I like to stitch my first stitch right in the center of the slice, and I just make a long stitch. And then I'll stitch two little stitches, some smaller seeds, above and below it, just on a slight angle coming in towards that center stitch. I don't want to pull that fabric too tight. And then I'll do the same thing over here. So now I have 3 seeds on my apple. I'll flip it over and just knot off my thread. And I'll set this aside to work on the next piece. So that's how I create the apple slice. I'll do that repeatedly with as many as I think I'm going to use for the snippet roll, and I'll also make some apples. Now when I make the apples, I'm not going to attach them to a piece of fabric like I did here. I'm just going to stitch them down and bring them to the point where I stitch the core with some pearl thread, and then I stitch 2 seeds. So you can see on the back, my work on the back, and that's my apple. And I'll stitch an abundance of them. Now I'm probably not going to use all of them in my piece, but I do like to just put some down, just so I kind of know how many I want or how many I need. That looks actually really good. I have a couple left over. I can swap them out, move their position, change the colors, and then if I have 2 left over, I'll use them on another project. I'll do the same thing over here, and this will help me to figure out how many of these little elements I want to my piece. So I think that's pretty good. I'm going to set these aside, keeping them close to me because I might change that around. In the next video, we'll work on the design. So create your apples and your apple slices, cut out your fabric for your snippet roll, and we'll work on the design in the next video. So that's the first step of making the snippet roll. Gather your supplies and create your apple slices. I like to create an abundance of them, and that way that gives me more material to work with. I can also add on additional pieces to my snippet roll or make additional ones as well. See you next time.